Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where us four Backlot boys view and review every single Palme d'Or winner. We here are checking out all of the Cannes Film Festival Grand Prix award winners, the films that were...
Palme d'Or, by the way, not Grand Prix.
Well, it's the Palme d'Or.
Sounds good, though.
It was called the Grand Prix
I say that
for a little while, and then...
It was. There is another prize there called the Grand Prix, and that's second place. We're not reviewing the second place films.
That's next time.
Yes.
Next time.
Today, we are talking about the 1991 film Barton Fink, directed by Joel and Ethan Coen is what the...
Just one.
IMDb... IMDb says it was directed by both. The credits say it was only directed by Ethan, correct? Joel. Whatever.
You had a 50-50 shot.
Hey, whatever.
And you flubbed it.
Yeah, I did. It's starring John Turturro, John Goodman, Judy Davis. This movie has a lot of Coen Brothers staples in it, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys think of the 1991 Palme d'Or winner.
Those walls could use some Coen Brothers staples, you know what I'm saying?
Hello.
We're going to get into it. But first, we have our housekeeping. Since we're in the thick of the show now, we can get all of our little funsies out of the way and spend way too much time on them. Last week, we talked about Anatomy of Fall. This year, 2023's Palme d'Or winner. It got a 9.1 from us. We liked that movie quite a lot. Really got into what was going on in it. And well, as always, I highly recommend you check out that review. Check out the card in the corner for that. But we now must move on to maybe my favorite section, maybe my second favorite section. There's one section that is maybe my more favorite section, but it's the featured comment. Abram, I do believe you have something for us to listen to and ponder.
Yeah, we don't have to ponder too much because it's a short comment, but it comes from, again, our beloved son, John Tour 11, who has returned on comments on the review for The Ballad of Narayama and says the following, a little off topic, but we'll let it slide because it's the only comment we got. I can't wait to get into these.
You gotta work with what you got.
I can't wait to get into these Palme d'Or winners. I'm still rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer with my friends. FYI, that is 144 episodes plus 110 spin-off episodes. I still have some Oscar winners to catch up on before I can get to Cannes. Now, I'm going to give us a creator heart to support. Again, you got to support your kids. But I do want to say something here, John Tour. You're watching on a Buffy, but there was a deal made a long time ago, and I think you've been hoping. I think you've been hoping that I've forgotten, but I haven't forgotten. You said
over a year ago, if I remember correctly.
Over a year ago, you said that you would watch all the Star Wars films and report back. We have gotten not a single report. Not a single report.
Hey, you had multiple months of Quest not happening that you could have done that on.
It's true.
A little sliding, a little grace period.
Yeah.
Next time you sit
it's
down,
like a student debt.
Right. Yeah, you get the window, then you gotta start doing your repayments.
Yep.
And it's time to cash a check, John Tour. Next time you sit down to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, think to yourself about the fact that you got some unfinished business. That's all I'm gonna say.
It's true.
Yeah. That's all I'm gonna say.
Just a little guilt tripping. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. You know, we're not mad. We're just disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, are we mad, disappointed, pleased, happy, bored by Barton Fink?
Barton Stink.
Yeah.
That's the first and last time we'll say it on the episode.
And for that, Tanner, you have to go first. Tell us, what did you think of this movie?
Timo, thank you so much for allowing me to go first because I really, really loved Barton Fink. I think it's a very entertaining watch. I mean, from the moment go, you kind of settle into the aesthetic that the Coens are spinning for you. I'm a big Coens guy. This is one of their most popular ones that I had not seen. I was very excited to get to it because I find it a fascinating win in the Cannes Film Festival history anyway. But this film in particular has a lot of the same ideals and the very aesthetic that I like to go for, where it's all very like loose and metaphorical and like what's really happening, what's not really happening, but it's still tells a clear story about itself as well. It just has a lot of different interpretations, is I guess what I'm trying to say, and I can't wait to get to those. But to get to the core of Barton Fink itself, I mean, it's fantastically acted. It looks fantastic. Timo, for you, there's lots of great sound cues in Barton Fink as well that I'm sure we'll get to. I find the story so fascinating. I mean, you take this narrative of like what can be a played out Hollywood story of like, let's tell a movie, let's make a movie about the beginning of Hollywood and what it was like back in the 1930s and 40s making films. Babylon, exactly. Mank, exactly. But instead, you get this like really twisted and hellish delve into the mind of the titular Barton Fink, and I loved it.
All right. Abram, what do you think? We got to split up that the two people on the same camera cannot give their opinions right after each other. Abram, Barton Fink, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really not much of a Coen's guy, not because I dislike them, but just because in reality, it's only
Conehead.
I wouldn't call myself a Conehead. This is only the second of their films as
a movie about that,
as a unit or as singular directors that I've seen. I've only ever seen this, and of course, No Country for Old Men, which I love. I didn't like Barton Fink, I have to say. I found the movie actually quite annoying. And I'm still trying to put my finger particularly on why. I think that there is no doubt a very large, just subjective disconnect for me. Because very early on, I found it difficult to really buy into the style of this film. This is, of course, a black comedy. The sort of melodrama in the delivery of a lot of sequences just didn't really work for me. I found it to be quite obvious, even if there's a lot of different sort of metaphorical avenues to travel down. I think that by the end, I felt like I was being hit over the head with a brick. And as the brick shattered on my head, I could kind of pick up which pieces I wanted and connect them into some sort of sculpture of meaning. But it just didn't really work for me. Unlike plot level entertaining, I think you're totally right, Tanner, that it's well acted and well shot, but just not for me, I don't think. I just found it grating, actually, in some respects.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. We will talk to, Abram, let's discuss that. No.
Sure. We're gonna do a little Barton Fink therapy here.
No. I'll go next.
Delve into the sick, twisted mind of Abram Buer, why don't we? The hellish, fucked up mind.
I actually like this movie quite a bit. I think I'm very much with Tanner on it. I thought the characters, this kind of setting gets me a lot of the times. Let's make a movie about making movies, and let's talk like this and have our Hollywood producers, and to get into that mode of thinking is easy for me, and I'm a sucker for it, is what I'm trying to say. The rest of the film, though, I thought was interesting and entertaining. The characters seemed very interesting to me to kind of study not only what they say, but what do I think they're thinking through what they say, and then who gets to talk in which circumstances.
Sure.
I think that
there's a lot of that.
I think I've got some theories rumbling around and like little pinballs in my head about hierarchy of monologuing. Who gets to just talk endlessly at a different character? And I really love the sound in this movie. I think that this is a really excellent masterclass on mixing. Mixing is what makes the sound design in this movie good. It's not, the sound design is pretty, I would say, stock standard in realism, trying to make you, feel or think some things, but the mix makes it come alive. And so I was having a lot of fun just kind of listening and paying attention to that. And I think that there is some substance. I'm a little shaky on the substance. I haven't quite put together what the shattered pieces of the brick mean, but they mean something and I think that this film does have a unique line, a unique theory on film and art and theater and class even. Dare I say it? Dare I bring that up in a Quest episode?
No. Not on Quest.
I think there's class themes in this team. I just can't agree. I just can't agree.
I get behind that one.
Tugger, round us out. What were your thoughts on Barton Fink?
I'm usually pretty hit or miss with the Coens. I historically was okay with No Country for Old Men, but certainly the lowest out of all of us and lowest out of pretty much anyone I know. And some of their movies like Inside Llewyn Davis and The Battle of Buster Scruggs and Raising Arizona, I think are kind of bad. But there are moments in their filmography, primarily things like Big Lebowski and Fargo, and my personal favorite, The Hudsucker Proxy, where they really go off the rails in terms of weird characters and a weird locale and just putting like a sort of cartoonish spin on reality that really draws me in to feel like this is something really distinct. And Barton Fink is another one of those. I'm happy to say it's not like a No Country for Old Men type Coen Brothers.
I mean, it's literally not. It's very
That's a great
different
point.
from that film.
Yeah. But Barton Fink is the kind of movie that I come to for the Coen Brothers. Maybe it's a specific era or a section of their writing that they really tackled in those movies, but it reminded me a lot of the Hudsucker Proxy in terms of a sense of heightened reality and exaggerated sets and exaggerated performances. I am with Timo in that I'm not quite sure where I land on the themes, and especially the ending, I think left me pretty cold. But for a lot of the runtime of the film, I was just sitting there like smiling at every sequence because it was a group of people having obviously a ton of fun, just putting this on screen, hamming it up to the nth degree, using crazy lighting effects and crazy set design. It's like the most Lynchian of the Coen Brothers filmography.
Yeah, I was watching it with my roommates, and we were drawing those.
There's some Eraserhead visuals and stuff.
I mean, he looks like a racer.
He does look like a Eraserhead. Yeah,
and
is Eraserhead the man or the baby?
It's the guy.
the baby is a Eraserhead's monster.
Yeah. What? Not the Lost Highway. The other one. The other. Mulholland Drive and this film
That's the one.
are temporally connected. I think they come from a
sure.
very similar oeuvre of 90s Hollywood indie filmmaking that is also just fucking weird.
Yeah. And that is what this film does best, is being fucking weird and having characters that are spouting crazy shit and having a set that is doing insane things. And especially, I think this is one of my favorite uses of everything technical that we've reviewed for this series in terms of they're really doing experimental things with camera placement and camera movement and the sound design, as you were talking about, Timo, and we'll certainly get into. It calls attention to itself in terms of all of its filmmaking fundamentals, but I think it stands out because of that, and I really, really loved it.
Well, one thing that I think it does call attention to, since we're, if we want to start here, is that it sort of like is in a flow state of subjectivity and objectivity in terms of being placed in Barton Fink's psyche and his perspective. We flow in and out of that very smoothly, and it makes it feel, it gives it that like dreamlike quality that I really, really appreciated about Barton Fink, where, you know, it's obviously quite heightened in its storytelling, but what I really appreciated about it is that you get that mood right away. Like, it immediately sort of fills you with almost like a dread-like feeling of like, I know that things aren't right, things feel off. I'm in a foreign land with my good friend Barton Fink. We're the Hotel Earl, and I don't like it. Things are dingy and grimy and weird, and everyone doesn't like me, and everyone's yelling at me for some reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I just dig that, like, the Coens immediately get you into that lane with Barton Fink, and then it just snowballs from there, and things get crazier and zanier and more chaotic.
I was shown that scene of showing up at the lobby of the Earl Hotel in film school.
Yeah.
I don't remember why, but I remember we were all watching it, and me and my roommate Joe has also been to film school, and we're like, we've seen this scene before, but we have not seen the rest of the movie. We're like, the scene ended, we're like, and there's the extent of my knowledge of Barton Fink. This is new territory. So I agree that the film opens in a very atmospheric way, and a way that, without saying a whole lot, puts you very uneasiness. Well, that's not, I fumbled the grammar on that sentence, but you know.
No, it's fine. We understand.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta actually rewind even further, right? Because we don't begin at the Earl. We begin instead backstage of Barton Fink's, as we come to learn, highly acclaimed New York indie stage production. But what's interesting, and it goes to your point,
fishmongers.
True.
Exactly.
It goes to your point, Tanner, about sort of subjectivity and objectivity, because I think we established very early on what this film is trying to do and who it is trying to remain within the psychic boundaries of, right? Because we watch not the end of the play unfold, but instead we watch Barton Fink as he's sort of mouthing some of his lines or just watching almost quite nervously to make sure his actors hit their beats.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very interesting way to begin because there's a point towards the end of the film where I think there's a pretty substantial shift where we go from the sort of mind of a self-aggrandizing but also self-tortured Barton Fink to a larger and sort of unrestrained look at how everybody else thinks he sucks, actually. And I think one of the interesting things about the camera and this notion of subjectivity, reflecting back on the film, is the way that they don't make it extremely obvious that everybody thinks that Barton Fink is an ass until the script is ready to totally reveal that. There are very great and subtle cues, like watching John Goodman very obviously tune out as Barton Fink is sort of monologuing in the foreground of this really stark focused shot. So I think that there is some really interesting stuff there, and it does link into, when we're ready to get to it, the larger thematic conversation, because as you guys are talking about this being sort of a reflection of early Hollywood industry stuff, I view the whole film through sort of the lens of anxieties about being a writer. And
of course,
in a lot of ways, it feels like Mr. Coen here attacking himself, which I think to me is maybe the most interesting sort of way to read this film, and maybe the thing that I took out that annoyed me the least. But we'll get there in time. I think just the intro before the Earl is kind of critical to setting up how this film is operating.
Yeah. Well, I will quickly say a bit of trivia about Barton Fink. I don't want to sprinkle this in. That Abram, you were actually more correct than you may know, because the Coens have been very upfront about how they wrote this film as sort of like a mental break or a getaway from writing their 1990 film Miller's Crossing. They're having writer's block while creating Miller's Crossing, and so began work on Barton Fink, and it's very much a reflection of that. I mean, his whole thing is that he has a writer's block going into Hollywood. This is the Coen's fourth feature film, so yeah, very early on in their careers.
And almost in a similar position as Fink, sort of maybe broken into the industry already, but not having really proved themselves in the industry. So parallels to draw there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you can even draw the parallel of how his career is intended to sort of explode after he gets picked up to be a writer in Hollywood, and how, I mean, obviously the Coens did very well for themselves, and it only went uphill for them from there. I think it has since gone downhill a little bit.
Well, no, they're broken up too.
That's a great point. Yeah. The band is apart. But I really do like how Barton Fink, the film, starts off in two different places where my mind believes that the film starts at the Earl. Because that shot of him walking through the hallway or the lobby with the really tall plants on the sides and the super high ceiling and the really stark ray of sunlight coming in and dust in the air, that is the image that my mind thinks of. That and the hallway and the green, brown, yellow color palette of this film. But Abram, I think, is correct to draw it back to that opening sequence, because the fascination this film has with facial expressions and character reactions, I think, is another one of its core facets. And obviously, it starts immediately with that. And watching this guy's face, where you can tell that he's focused and that he's paying attention to this and he wants it to go well, but he's not doing a lot. He's very still. His eyes are kind of defocused. He's not like moving his eyebrows at all. I really think that the way that the Coens frame facial expressions in this is core to why we read it so heavily as a understanding of psyche and a look into the mind of different people, but primarily Barton Fink, because there's a lot of person's face super close to the camera in a lot of different sequences, or hanging on facial features that aren't accompanied by dialogue or even sound effects in some cases, where the only thing on screen that you have to focus on is dramatically ridiculous facial expressions. And of course, that primarily comes through John Goodman, who I think delivers some of the greatest
Yes.
facial expression performances I've ever witnessed in all my days.
You really have like some really expressive actors here
Yeah.
with John Turturro, who and John Goodman, of course,
Yeah.
who aren't your like Hollywood sexy dudes. Of course,
Yeah.
they're not
Well, to me.
you're not your movie stars. You got Steve Buscemi in here as
Yeah.
well. I mean, you get in these guys with very unique looking faces who are very very expressive
Yeah.
in a lot of their roles, and I think they all really bring it here. Specifically, Turturro and Goodman as our two sides of very different coins, frankly, are upper crust New York highfalutin playwright / screenwriter, and then our salt of the earth insurance salesman who just wants everyone just wants everyone to like him. He's kind of an aw shucks kind of fella, until of course we get some developments about his character towards the end of the film where that completely reframes his whole jovial nature.
Quite the twist there in the second part of the film. I mean, I wanted to note that not just our leading actors are doing really well in this film, but our supporting cast is also hilarious, and that I think that this
Yeah.
film is very funny in its black comedy. That the way that these, like, Michael Lerner, I'm here looking at the cast, who plays the Jack
Lipnick,
who's
yeah.
definitely supposed to be like what, Jack Warner?
Warner,
One of them. It doesn't really
Irving
matter.
Thalberg,
Yeah.
maybe like
By
an
the way,
Selznick in there too.
Yeah.
Nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Yes.
Just the way that he delivers and embodies this like totally idiotic studio head is
Yes.
is hilarious. It's so funny, and
It's unmatched, dude.
from what I have read about the real life idiotic studio heads, this guy nailed it. This performance is really on spot,
Yeah.
spot on even for how it really was, and the souse of the author, who's definitely also someone
Souse!
souse.
Souse!
Kind of a William Faulkner, maybe, rehash.
Yes, it very much meant to be based on William Faulkner, by the way. Yeah.
These side characters breathe a lot of life into this otherwise very, very, I would say void and blank film without a lot of other humanity. That the only little other expressions of what life is like in LA at this time are these balls crazy Hollywood types that you get to see Barton Fink react to and be kind of thrust in the middle and have to deal with people wanting stuff from him that he kind of isn't able to deliver.
Mm-hmm. Any standout performances for you guys, Abram?
No.
Okay.
I mean, you guys are right. I mean, I don't really want to, walk ground that's already been walked, but I think it does also come back to my just sort of disconnection from the style of the film, because I think you're right that the shouting sequences, it's Lipnick. Lipman is from Seinfeld.
What?
That's what it is. Sorry, that's stuck in my head.
Oh, okay.
Lipnick.
I thought we told you the name Lipnick, and you're like, so Lipman is
No. It's funny, but I think part of my problem with this film is that I just find the character of Barton Fink to be kind of annoying to watch, and
Sure.
which is no doubt probably intentional, but even intentional annoyance can reach a point of such friction that I kind of check out a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, and it goes back again to what I was saying about how the film opens, right, with this very subjective camera. I think we're asked to so implicitly buy into Barton Fink's image of himself, but I don't really.
I don't agree with that, actually.
I
No,
don't
because
either.
I think the entire movie is pointing out that the world the world doesn't see him the way he sees himself, and you shouldn't either.
Yeah, sorry, Tucker. If you pay attention, I didn't mean to talk over you. That's why I apologized. If you pay attention to like his writing, especially at the beginning of the film with his play, it's like Bear something choirs.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the film when he finishes the script for the Burly Man, they're like the same script.
They are.
And
It's the same line, I believe.
Exactly, it's the same closing line. You come to learn that the characters' names that we overhear at the beginning in his play are just names of people in his life.
Yeah, his family members.
He's not a creative writer, and he doesn't really come up with a new story. But he's convinced that it's the best thing I've ever written, just like the play was the best thing he'd ever written. So it's almost like anxiety affirming for Barton Fink that he is a hack.
Yeah.
Like he can't create something else.
And that's why I would say I don't think the movie wants you to implicitly side with his perspective at all. I mean, I think frankly, all the performances and the writing of the film kind of go against that to kind of create an uneasy tension with him as the main character, which is it took me a while to be sold as John Turturro, Barton Fink, being the core character of this film, because I do think that the supporting performances greatly outshine him by intention in terms of how he is a relatively meek guy. But I find it to be even though it wouldn't be how I would write a film, I find it to be a really distinct creative choice to put you in the shoes of a schmuck who the entire movie tells you is a schmuck and tells you you shouldn't like him.
I'm not really sure if for me, I definitely did start with this perspective that Abrams coming from, where I'm like, he's shown as the main character, he's shown as the play, he's got some issues, he doesn't think he's good enough for it. Like, okay, well, we'll see where it goes.
Oh, sure, at the beginning,
Yeah, and then
I
as
think-
the film progresses, though, it becomes quite clear to me how self-absorbed he is, and the ways that his inability to listen. He doesn't listen to anybody but himself.
Listen.
I think you guys are coming at the point I was making from the context of the film being over. Because I think if you look just at where the film begins, the only information we have doesn't suggest yet that he's a hack. To the contrary, it suggests it's basically explicit in the narrative that he is hot talent being scouted. People love his work. And even the first moment we get beyond what is in some ways an empathetic vulnerability as he's wanting his big show to go right is him talking with us not yet having an understanding of his class position and his disposition towards the creative arts. The first thing we really learn from him is that he wants to be this indie voice for the people, and he doesn't want to be subjugated yet by Hollywood, etc. Now, in hindsight, we can look at that very clearly through the lens of his ego, but I don't think that's the case at the beginning. So I think that by the time I end up with Lipnick yelling at him, and it's a funny scene, but he's just sort of sitting there babbling like an idiot, I'm at this sort of tension in my mind of, okay, this character who's been told to me is quite prestigious, quite successful, young talent, aligned with the people, in the scene, really hip, actually kind of sucks. That's fine, but I just don't think that idea is, for me, sort of teased out and identified until we end up with Meadows in the hotel room and we're watching and realizing, okay, Barton Fink doesn't write anything all day. He waits for Meadows to come over to put his fucking 2 words on the page, then go have a drink, and then they banter with each other and it becomes obvious who Barton Fink is. But because, in my opinion, that's not the case from how his character is first constructed, I end up with him in Hollywood kind of just disinterested. I think, if anything, it's an issue with where the character begins opposed to where the character ends, because I'm in complete assessment with you guys in terms of who Barton Fink is by the conclusion of the narrative. But I'm just talking about the sort of subjective process I took on my way through it. I think that he's presented it as one way and then ends up being kind of blank and unlikable, but not in an intentional way for the next little phase of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess your issue is with how he is introduced, and then once his characterization becomes clear basically in his first interaction with Charlie Meadows, that's why you're interested in him, or that second phase, that middle phase, is where you're uninterested.
I'm uninterested until it becomes sort of pretty obvious that nobody likes him. I think that's the problem.
I see.
Because we still end up following him, and then he becomes this sort of white knight character for Audrey, which is whatever. He's here to stand up to the big writer. That's the whole premise. The whole premise of the picnic scene is that Audrey's being treated wrongly, and he's going to be the guy that stands up.
I mean, I think we're just reading the scenes very differently.
Sure.
Because when he has that moment where he stands up to what's his name?
WP something or other.
That's what it is.
Souse!
WP.
We can call him WP for now.
WP Mayhew.
Mayhew. When he stands up to Mayhew, and then Mayhew, he doesn't really stand up to Mayhew. May just kind of like brushes him off and goes to take a leak. And then when he hits Audrey, and then Barton comes up and he's like, "That son of a bitch." Well, he's still a great writer, of course. Like, he is so meek and such a little weasel in that moment that he can't even like come down a hard line on his
Sure.
hero, because he is his hero up until that moment.
And-
by being like, "Oh, he's a piece of shit, but he's still a great writer."
Yeah.
Like, at that point, I'm not like, Barton Fink, like, he's a white knight. Right? He's standing up for Audrey. At that moment, I am like, he still is a coward. Like, he's unwilling to like let his preconceived notions and his ego be recontextualized in this moment.
And I think that it's in. Is it? I think it is in that scene. It's either in that scene or the previous scene with Audrey, where I was sitting there, and maybe this is to the benefit, or maybe this is to the detriment of the movie. But Audrey says this line that empathy requires understanding, and that she is empathetic to Mayhew because she understands him. And to me, I think that is kind of the core of the movie. That's like the thesis statement. I like said it out loud. I was like, that's the thesis statement right there. Like, let's, it's the middle of the movie. I was like, I think that's the thesis. Let's see if it's gonna, if they're gonna play around with this idea. And I
Sure.
think that they kind of do. His lack of understanding of from a class lens of what working people are really like, and his lack of desire to understand them. Well, they show up in the rest of the film, but I think that it is almost it's a little dropped. It's not necessarily like explored fully, and his inability to understand hurts, I think, his art, because he can't create
Yeah.
anything genuine because he has no understanding or no empathy for the people he proclaims to be writing about and be writing for.
Yeah.
And so,
Uh,
well, yeah. And I think that's where I'm done with it. I think that
Yeah.
that idea branches off into like a film and theater and art discussion, but that's like that's another sphere of the thematic content of this film.
Yeah. One of the I want to take that thread and run with it. I want the spool to
Follow you along.
fly with me
Yeah.
in the wind. The idea of the isolation of Barton Fink, I think, is something that I was really focused on throughout the film, because we have a lot of side characters, and basically every scene he's with another side character. But I think the reason I never settled into, even in the beginning, being bought into Barton Fink being a all around good guy that I should
A brilliant mind.
that I should follow and support, or implicitly agree with, is because I feel like even from the very beginning he's super isolated. In that first shot, obviously he's isolated. He's not really paying attention to the people around him, even when he is out on stage, giving a curtsy or whatever. It's a very like robotic move. He goes out, he does it, he retreats.
The blue class like backstage workers are the ones like busting around him at the
Yeah.
very opening too.
Yeah, and then
Blue class.
and then
Blue
we also
collar,
get
sorry.
we also get the scene of the couple of upper class people that tangentially know him, telling him his film is great, and then the one guy that seems to know him, I believe a producer of some kind, Garland, telling him he's great and go to Hollywood. And then, of course, all of those sequences are with other characters, and then we get to Hollywood and we meet Chet, and then we meet Charlie, and then we meet all these other characters. And so even though he's always with other people, the reason I'm never bought into him as a person is he's, even within those sequences, he's isolated. He's not fully paying attention. As you were saying, Timo, he's not listening.
Or he
in
talks
between, we get a lot
over
of
them.
sequences.
He doesn't let them
ignoring
speak.
the situation. Yeah. And he talks a big game about how he cares about the working man and telling their stories, but we never see him interacting with average people until the dance room sequence,
Well, yes.
where he is fighting. And so
Where he tells the guy shipping out to war tomorrow, is like, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
I'm smarter than you. Shut the hell up.
and we've all seen the shot of him pressing his finger into his forehead.
Like, yeah, at that moment, he is like, get the hell out of my way, average person. I just finished my screenplay, and I'm the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah. So I would say that the isolation of this film, and that tying into the themes of what he's creating, and why he's creating it, and why he's not a great artist, or his art doesn't turn out the way that he wants, and he's not as prolific because he's not fully bought into it. I think that's built up through basically every interaction. It's the way that the films, the sequences are shot, and the dialogue is paced, and the way that John Turturro's performance leans into the fact that he's not paying attention and he doesn't know anyone, and the only person that cares about him is a fucking serial killer. And I just think that the entire movie is actually very, very focused on that from a filmmaking angle in terms of framing and a pacing angle. The way that it's structured, cutting back and forth between him in his hotel room and him out in the world. But again, always talking to people that are trying to exploit him, that he's trying to exploit, that he doesn't care about, or that he ends up fighting. So that's a long way to say, I actually do think, Timo, that it is a lot more focused on that class dynamic and the themes of the way that he interacts with people, kind of in a subtle way throughout the entire film.
Your note about isolation got me thinking of this little mise en scène detail, in that the hotel is seemingly dead empty when we
Yep.
arrive. We never really see anybody in the hallways, except
Just
that
Chet and Charlie.
the shoe shine service comes around every day. And why are there all those shoes outside those rooms? It's because every room is occupied, and in that hotel is full of people who, there is no evidence for this, but I believe it, are similar to Barton Fink, and that
Yeah,
this is
probably.
supposed to, you could play it out to a sort of uh, an evil of Hollywood, of having attracted these people to live in dingy situations, or just normal people who live in this, nasty hotel. Just a note that, like, while he is surrounded and this hotel is full of people, and we hear that a couple times through the sound design, Barton Fink never really interacts with any of them,
Yep.
minus Charlie and Chet.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Hotel Earl.
Mhm.
I think it's a fascinating setting.
Maybe one of my favorite locations in the fucking movie.
Because Timo, you mentioned it. The image of him walking down the hallway, and it's just this hallway that like stretches into a pinpoint. Essentially, I don't
Kind
know.
of like the apartment that the office
Mhm.
shot.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's quite
exactly.
similar.
I think it's obviously meant to invoke as well the Overlook Hotel and The Shining as well. But that long stretching hallway that's like dimly lit, and it's just lined with shoes, these brown leather shoes all the way down and in front of every single door. It's just a striking image that I love that the Coens were able to like. That's like such a haunting thing, and again, it goes back to like that what I was talking about, like the masterful sense of feeling that they invoke you with throughout the entire film of like, this is off and like not real, and I
Yeah.
don't like being here.
Yeah.
And obviously I credit to Roger Deakins as well, Daddy Deakins,
Daddy.
cinematographer on this one.
Father.
Uh, but like, can we talk about just like just this hellish setting, or maybe it's purgatorial if we want to get into some themes of religion that are here as well. I think, but like we all thought, I'm sure we all thought it. The male fluid that resembles the glue that sticks the wallpaper to the walls. That's
But doesn't
melting
stick
off.
the
Yeah,
wallpaper to the walls.
that's melting and sweating off,
ooze.
as they say.
Yeah.
I'll call
Creamy
it
ooze.
Yeah, it's ooze. That's what we'll call
It's
it
ooze.
to keep the show family friendly.
Yeah. I cursed a couple times already.
That's all right. But like it's so gross.
So
like
disturbing.
you see it probably 2 or 3 times throughout the film, just like a drip coming in between like the
seam of
slits,
the
yeah,
wallpaper,
the seam, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe. And then people get it on them, and they're like sticking thumbtacks into it, and you're like, ugh.
Lots of squelching going
Yeah,
on.
lots of squelching, and the hotel room itself is like, it's like covered in a layer of grime,
Yeah.
and there's like one fan, and everyone's so sweaty.
He picks up that pen,
Yeah.
and the paper's
Yes.
yellowed around it. I love that image.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just love this setting for most of the events of the film, actually.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I also like how everyone's so sweaty when they're talking real fast at each other and yelling, and they're all sweaty. Love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's very striking visually, but I think it leads me back to wonder why. What's the point of the hotel? And I think maybe the most precise way, because I think you guys are right that I didn't maybe pick the strongest examples, but I think part of my issue with the early characterization of Barton Fink is sort of, what is it? Who is he? Because I don't know if we ever really get a good sense of who he is. And maybe again this is intentional for the punchline of, oh, he actually can't write anything. Because I do think that this is I think it's a pretty clear homage to The Shining, and on both the sort of like production design and thematic level.
There's a typewriter and lots of that in the hallways in the hotel. Yeah.
The
But
murdering.
Murdering.
Yeah, I come to wonder sort of, okay, it's goopy, it's sweaty, it's weird. I think Tanner, you're right, it's purgatorial, even though wouldn't say this is a religious film. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on those themes. But why is Barton Fink here? And like what does his interactions with the space actually mean? And I'm not sure. I'm curious what you guys think about this. It's largely just an open discussion point, but there's
Yeah.
potentially something to be said for the ways in which this is a place that is beneath him. You could argue. I mean, we come to learn that Mr. Meadows is not of his status for sure. Now, is the implication then that the people who come to this hotel, is it more of your Barton Fink types, or is it more of your Mr. Meadows types? I don't know if we necessarily know.
Please call him
Although,
Charlie.
uh,
Oh, Charlie.
I would suggest that the fire that engulfs a place suggests that this is more a place that Charlie inhabits than people like Charlie inhabit than people like Barton Fink. But when he tacks the wallpaper back up, is that him not wanting to engage with all the grossness and the ugliness of this lower class that he's trying to write about? Is there something to be said for this film sort of accidentally painting people below Barton Fink as being gross and weird? What's the film really trying to say? I guess what I'm curious about is what's the point of view of this whole gross hotel?
I think to
I
me,
would say. Oh, go ahead, Timo. Sorry.
I think to me, he chose to go to the Hotel Earl, and in Barton Fink's mind, him staying at this place is kind of equivalent or gonna give him the vibe that he wants to capture in his writing, gonna give him the inspiration and the setting and the characters that will be able to that are the lower class, and that's kind of why he picked this place. Like, I think there's a point that's made in the film that his salary, or that the one of like the execs are like, what the hell, like, get him out of this place, get him out of that place,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we'll pay
It's
Yeah,
the first time he meets Lipnick.
is-
Lipnick's like, send him to the other places. Why
Yeah.
the fuck is he at the Earl?
and and the fact that we never see Barton, we barely ever see. We see him at the very end, like out and about in the city. We don't see him like going out to just try to experience anything. He's always in his room when he wants to try to work and write. And so, does the film like equivalate or whatever, equate? That's the word. Equivalate.
That's the one.
No, that would be a good word.
Yeah.
Like the people that Barton Fink, I think it's more like Barton Fink thinks of them as lower, perhaps. He thinks of them, and maybe not so much that they are, like, the film is trying to say that they are gross, but trying to externalize his own thoughts and opinions. Perhaps, maybe.
So I think that the Hotel Earl, the reason why I think it is like very deliberate thematically is, I would say this is maybe one of the most like metaphorical thematic readings I've ever done for a film, and
Here we go.
it's a little
Strap
bit
in.
past me. But buckle up, put your fucking jet rocket seatbelt on, because we're going to space, boys. The Hotel Earl is his mind. He
Thank you.
never enters the place physically. He always essentially just cuts, and we teleport, and we're in there. None of the people that are in the Hotel Earl ever interact with anyone outside of the place, except for the woman that ends up dying, who is one of the only people in the film that he shares any kind of connection with. And so I see the Hotel Earl in its grunginess, in its emptiness, in its loneliness, in the strangeness of the people that inhabit it, primarily Chet, Charlie, and the two detectives, as a representation of his mind, and the fact that he believes that this is the place that he needs to be to make his art. But obviously that's not the case, because it doesn't work for him. But I think all of the creative choices like are reflective of his mindset, and not necessarily like this is about Hollywood or lower class people. It's about how he views himself. So I don't think that the grunginess of and falling apartness of the Earl, or the fact that Charlie Meadows is a serial killer, and him being the representation of the lower class, I don't think those are commentary of those things in specific. It's more of how he views those things, and how in order to be good enough fodder for his writing, things need to be exaggerated and ridiculous and gross and weird and murderous. Because Charlie's always trying to tell him like normal things about himself, that he likes these kind of movies.
Boy,
that,
do I got stories.
yeah, just like
do I
average
got
things.
stories.
But the only things that stick with Barton are either the things that are directly related to him, like the wrestling and the Jack Oakey pictures, or the fact that there's murder and it's gross and things are falling apart. That is all Barton Fink. I think it has basically nothing to do or nothing to say about the external topics. It's all about Barton Fink's view of those things, and then kind of an implicit criticism of the way that he views the world. It's like, yeah, this is why you're fucking lonely. Like, you choose a place that is gross and falling apart and you never interact with anyone. Like, that's your fault. This is a world of your own making.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Basically, that the Hotel Earl, and this is maybe a bit of like a raising your hand in film 101 thing.
That's
it's
why I had described the rocket ship.
I believe the Hotel Earl is a representation of Barton Fink's deteriorating mind.
Yeah.
And that, you know, the wallpaper's literally coming off the inside of his head.
Wallpaper's coming?
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways. And I don't necessarily think that Barton Fink thinks lowly of working class people. I just think he thinks of himself too highly. Whether or not he's willing to admit it to himself, he does think that he is a great writer, but there is this nagging anxiety that becomes, you know, greater and greater throughout the entire film, that maybe he's a hack. But like, maybe it's his ego is what I'm really trying to say. His ego is so great that it like prevents him from connecting with people, kind of as Tucker was saying. Like, Charlie says to him on multiple occasions, there's lots of like repeated dialogue in this film, which I enjoy as well, where he's like, boy, could I tell you stories. Like, Barton, that is your in. That's your in to this class that you have no access to, you have no point of reference for. And when a little later, when Charlie tells him, "Oh, I wrestled a lot in high school. You know, I could show you some things," and Barton Fink's like, "No, I don't want to do that." And then he slams him on the floor, and then Charlie leaves. And he doesn't actively pursue these things, because as much as he wants to position himself as a champion of the working class, and I'm going to tell real stories. And yes, Charlie, you do have stories. Everyone has stories, and they need to be told. Like, he cannot get out of his own way to help himself. Even with Audrey, when he is interacting with her, it's pretty transparent, to me at least, that like he's only sexually interested in her.
Yeah, I would agree.
He is not like looking for a companion, or when she offers to come by and help him write, I think there is the primary motivation for him is like, this is my chance with this lady. Her husband's a real asshole, and this is my chance.
Yeah,
and
especially because both Mayhew and Meadows had been telling him like, oh yeah, in your status and position, you should be getting all sorts of women.
Exactly. And to that point, when Audrey gets there and reveals to him that Mayhew is a hack and hasn't written his last several novels, Barton Fink completely loses it. He like loses sight of her being able to help him write this film, because she said she could do it very easily,
and that she's probably quite a good writer, having written these things. His primary thought is, my hero, WP Mayhew. Yeah. WP Mayhew. He lied to me. He's a hack. Everything I knew was a lie. And then he obviously, he obviously has sex with Audrey. And then we get that shot that's like going down the drain, which nice, very nice. Coen's, I get you, I see you. And then she wakes up dead, and we're off and running into the third act.
Yeah. Where the fuck do we go from here? We spun this onto the web. But I loved
Abram,
it.
Abram, you speak, Abram.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're probably right. I think part of my issue though is just like, well, why does any of it matter? And maybe this is sort of the bridge I have a hard time crossing with the character of Barton Fink, because I feel like so many of the conclusions you guys are drawing, which make a lot of really provocative sense to me, I think are sort of drawn in the absence of what I feel were some more necessary and concrete scenes that illustrate what it looks like when Barton Fink is removed from this environment. Because I still, and maybe this is just because I'm a naive audience viewer who just hears something said about a character and I just start out by believing it, right? But the framework we have for beginning the narrative, again, to take it back to the beginning, is that Barton Fink is successful, and he is, if anything, being taken advantage of, and pushed down this Hollywood route. So I guess we can start to see the whole hotel as a reflection of his mind, and I think you're probably right. But kind of to what end, and kind of if everything is internal, is that useful? Should we have externalized a little bit more? Should we have seen him out on the street trying to interact with people? Could we have drawn some vignettes up that would have allowed him to have these other types of interactions that define his character a little bit better? Because I just have a hard time seeing the hotel, if it is only this big subjective internal thing, as like a useful commentary. Maybe part of my annoyance, and I'm still again trying to figure out, is like not a lot of it feels that useful to me. And I think I can't ignore the fact that the Barton Fink's preoccupation is one with class, and it is one that is ultimately muddier and muddier and muddier as the film goes along. And so maybe that's my issue. Maybe my issue is I just don't really understand it. And that could entirely be my fault, or it could be a fault of the fact that we spend so long in this like clearly self-referential goo of the internal headspace of a writer that we have to start like bringing a bunch of inferences in. And maybe I want a couple more very concrete illustrations of how Barton Fink operates when he's not talking to crazy people.
Well,
Sure.
What do you guys make then of the very ending of the film? So the place is on fire, and we then cut to Barton on the beach, and he walks along on the beach, and then he sits down, and the beautiful woman, or as he's walking, he sees a beautiful woman, and he sits down, and the beautiful woman sits down also, and they share a very surface level, a couple, just a greeting to each other, and then the camera pulls back, and it is the picture that is on his wall that he stared at for so long while writing, of a woman sitting, a beautiful woman sitting on the beach looking out towards the ocean. What do you guys make of that, if anything? Because I think that there's something in them frames, but what is
There
it?
is. I have no fucking idea what it is.
Okay, here we go. Can I allow me to spin you a web? Okay. And thank you, Timo, for bringing this up, because it was something I just looked at in my notes. I was like, oh, I need to talk about that. So, along with the many other thematic threads that I think, in the thematic interpretations that are available to us in Barton Fink, and that the Coens have said, like, yeah, there's a lot of different interpretations. We built it that way, and we're not going to come down on like which one is right, and which one we went into creating this film seeking to display. But of the many of them that we have not talked about is high art versus low art, because Barton Fink comes from the world of Broadway.
This is a good thematic line. Continue. I want to talk about this too.
He creates this play that gets rave reviews, and it's about the working class. And they don't make plays like that. They make plays about kings and queens. And he goes to Hollywood, and he has to start at the bottom of the ladder, writing a wrestling picture called The Burly Man. And he's like, I can't crack it. Why can't I crack this? I mean, it's such a simple narrative. Why can't I get this? I know nothing of this thing. And everyone's telling him it's so easy. They make 20 of these every year. Just go watch one and do that. There's two plot points in this film. There's an evil wrestler, and he looks out for he has either a girlfriend or an orphan child he has to look out for. Not both.
That sucks.
Or a what do they call him? A man child. You can't do that, you know. But Barton Fink, he very much views this as like a nuisance, a roadblock for him. He's like, why do I have to write this wrestling film? And it's very frustrating to him that he can't do it because of the world that he came from. So I think that's your high art versus low art starter kit for the theme.
Mm-hmm.
We get to the painting.
Okay. May I expand upon that just briefly?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
In the film, because film versus theater, I think, is a big, like,
of course,
it's the same,
especially in the 1940s. Yes. Yeah,
and I think that this film wants to investigate like Italian neorealism as something, as an art wave that is actually connected to the real life. But what kind of art does Charlie know and reference? Movies. What kind of art do the lower classes never go to see? Theater.
Exactly.
Right, and so I think that there's this fundamental disconnect in that Fink wants to make he knows how to make art for the in group, for
You saying Mank art, like the movie Mank?
Mank art. No, he wants to make art that is Mank art. Now I'm hearing that. The theater stuff is a little inaccessible, and the movie stuff
Mhm.
is very accessible, and it's that he struggles with, and yet the thing that he proclaims to want to create, this like theater for the people, is, at least in my mind, film is able to do that, but we are
Yeah.
shown in different, in all these different ways, the hierarchies and the gatekeeping and the people who monologue down to you, the theater bosses, the producers, that forbid that from happening and forbid film from being the art form that allows everybody to share their stories, which
Yeah.
that's my personal philosophy of how our art, chosen art form, actually operates in the real world. And I think that the Coen brothers are getting a little bit into that there. But there's more to go on this theme, so continue where I left off. Unless Abrams got a point.
If I can, if we can
Go
just
for it,
push, if we can
absolutely.
just push the picture down the road a little bit.
That's okay. That's fine.
They push it all the way in the movie.
That's
so
true.
Only fair.
I have a problem with this idea, and this is going to require some
Okay.
people that know more about the Coens than me to maybe counter or refute what I'm saying. When the film ends, we learn whether we believe Barton Fink is a hack or not. What we are told in the narrative is that the script he wrote is, how does he refer to it as, a fruity story?
Yes, what's his name?
Lipnick.
Lipnick, thank you. Lipnick refers to it as fruity a number of times, I think.
Yeah, it's a fruity story about like a man feeling emotions is essentially what he says. There's a particular word, but I don't remember it. And so that's not
He's
good
like,
enough.
he has to wrestle a guy in the ring, not just his emotions. Well, maybe a little for the critics, but still.
Yeah, I think just why, and this is, I think we're starting to get more towards why I'm annoyed by the movie.
Sure.
It feels like what's being illustrated here is a reality which was probably more true of the era of Barton Fink, but this film was not made at the time that Barton Fink was set. Wherein you had to choose if you're making the wrestling picture or you're making the art house picture, right? Barton Fink wants to be working in theater. He wants to be working in art cinema. He's not allowed to bring the wrestling picture upward.
Well, he's not even sure if he wants to be working in pictures at all. Like at the beginning of the film, he's basically
Right.
pressured into like, go out to Hollywood.
Make
the
your
working
money.
the working class people will be here in New York when you get back.
Sure, but what I'm saying is the film he chooses to write, no matter, regardless of the fact he didn't, he was reluctant, is
Yeah.
taking the wrestling picture to a higher sort of status.
Yes.
And he's told he can't do that. But isn't the Coen brothers' entire career built on taking what is ultimately lower art or more exploitative, violent storylines and bringing them to a place of prestige that they wouldn't be otherwise? I think it's a little bit weird, like 20 years after Rocky, when you're making this really acclaimed indie picture that has people talking about Hitler and has detectives and shotguns and sex and cum, and sorry, I forgot we're not supposed to say that on
Yeah.
this show.
They did it.
It
Those two already did it. Don't worry.
I feel like the meta product of Barton Fink sort of undermines this like strata of high and low art. I just don't really, to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that this would be a core takeaway when the Coen's actual films, this included, is a bridging of high and low art. When the film sort of ends in a place where you can't do that. I just don't think
Well,
that's
Abram.
congruous.
Well,
And again, I might
Abram,
misunderstand. So educate me, please.
I will get there because I think that the film's final sort of note on these ideals of high art and low art is that the line doesn't exist. Like art is art, and art can be meaningful to you no matter what like societal labels we ascribe to it.
The picture.
Because of the picture. So the picture, what is the picture that he's looking at? It's a fucking shitty hotel tourist picture. But he is enamored by it. He can't take his eyes away from it. And at the end of the film, it's his happy ending. It's his ideal, and it's what he's been yearning for. Is just like
Because if you choose to believe,
it's his moment of peace.
if you choose to
at the
believe
end
that
of the film.
Charlie is real and he really burnt down this hotel, which maybe he's not, maybe he is, But if we choose to believe that it's real, like Barton Fink's dead at this point in the movie. He is not alive, and we are seeing a scene from his
Yeah, and so he sings
imagination.
heaven. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like what is his heaven? What is his moment of peace? What is the moment where he finally gets to like be outside of this hellish hotel Earl, and he like gets to look at the ocean, and it's not like a scary crashing wave ocean. It's just a nice peaceful day, and there's a beautiful dame there for him to look at the gams of, or whatever they say. It's the exact recreation of the picture in the hotel. This like stupid touristy picture,
Like a 5x5 postcard.
that's
stuck in
it's a
frame.
postcard, and we'll never see that kid again. He'll just send us a postcard or whatever. It's that, and like Barton Fink, this guy who's obsessed with the Broadway, with the new real theater, his ideal art, the payoff to the art that he's been obsessed with is just a recreation of that shitty photo, of that shitty painting in a hotel room.
Yeah. And the reason I would say that line makes sense to me, and why I would push back Abram against this being like kind of antithetical to the scenario the movie was created in, is that, again, I see the film as anti-Fink. The mindset of Barton Fink is one you're not supposed to agree with, and that is constantly criticized throughout the movie. And the people that lean on the other side of Barton Fink towards the art can only be low art, like Lipnick, they're also painted as people whose mindsets you should not be following. They are treating people poorly. They are squashing artistic potential. And so the person that is high art is high art, and that needs to be distanced in Barton Fink. That mindset is shown to be not true to the way that art is created and unproductive. And so is Lipnick's perspective onto art. And so when both, I think the point is that he's right, Tanner's right, the division doesn't exist, and that the reality they are making films in is a mixture of both. And that's why the two mindsets that are polar opposites should be critiqued. And it's really once you learn to appreciate art on its level, even if it is just a 5x5 postcard on the wall, that you truly understand art and can create and be at peace.
Exactly.
Because that's also another thing, is he's always like trying to calm down, have a moment of quiet, but there's always a squelching, there's always a scream, there's always something going on. And it's when he finally understands a piece of art on its level that he finds a moment of peace.
And Abram, I don't want to tell you that for us to come down on the fact that you're wrong and you don't get it, because I think that is an interesting observation that you make about the Coens, and we're talking about Barton Fink specifically, but like they do bring this sort of philosophically absurdist edge to typically lowbrow stories, stories of
Go watch the Hudsucker Proxy,
Yeah.
which is all about the ridiculousness of the business structure around the fucking hula hoop.
Yeah.
The point of it is the hula hoop was the easiest thing in the world to invent, but look at all this crazy shit that happened.
And like their movies, what are their movies all about? They're all about robbers and thieves and murderers, but they always have this absurdist bent to them, much like Barton Fink does. But yeah, I do like that observation about their work and how this fits into that. I think it fits in very well. I think it's them holding a mirror up to themselves, which is especially interesting since it's so early in their careers.
Yeah, I think I'm still hung up on the woman because I'm not sure. Again, I just don't know if I read it in the same way, right?
Okay.
Because let's go back again to this idea that we're all kind of meeting each other in middle on, of the Hotel Earl is the headspace of Barton Fink. That's where he is. And to the point we've been talking about, you don't see him outside too often, right? But now we got him out here on the beach. He's about as far away from the hotel as he could possibly be.
Yeah.
And
It
what
actually comes as a moment of shock when you're like, this is the first time we're seeing the beach, and he lives in LA.
Yeah.
to be fair, though, just correct me if I'm wrong, we do that the shot of the wave hitting the rock is repeated. That's from the beginning of the film.
Yeah, it's like
Yep.
twice.
It's like a
Yeah.
a transitional shot.
It's a transition thing. It's not like a in-world thing.
Yeah. But let's get back to this idea, right, of he is now making the metaphor reality. He is now out of his head. There's a very short dialogue exchange between the woman on the beach and Barton Fink, where he asks, "Are you in the pictures?" And she goes, "What? You have to be joking." My read of this scene is that the longing that Barton Fink has when he looks at the photograph on the wall is not him looking at that as a piece of art, but him looking at something that isn't art and wanting to
Okay.
and realizing that maybe he's happy if he's not making the art. Because we have him here sitting on the beach with a box that presumably has the head of a murdered woman in it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he is now happy talking to somebody who's completely removed from Hollywood, just sitting and looking at her. There's no real to me, there's no real notion of creation there. I think you have to look at the photograph and say, okay, this is a form of art that the film is trying to comment on for the end to link back into this thematic idea about high or low art. To me, it's almost like he's entirely out of the creative framework now. He's just sitting on the beach and he's having to talk to somebody that is not in any way, shape, or form related to the field, to the arts, to anything. She is, I believe, the only character that he talks to that is not in some way associated
with writing or Broadway or Hollywood.
Yeah.
Besides Charlie.
But except for the characters in the Earl.
Oh,
All four of the
Charlie,
characters in the Earl are not.
Yeah.
Sure, but again, if we're thinking about this as being outside of his headspace, he's the only character in some quote unquote, my frame is very small, quote unquote reality that's not associated with creativity. So it almost
If this scene is not also in his headspace, as Team
I don't really think this scene is happening in real life.
I think part of the problem is I just think that it's sort of I don't know if pretentious is the right word. I still feel like I have to land on exactly the one word that sums up why the movie is annoying to me.
Sure.
But it almost reads to me, if you're following on from a scene where Barton Fink is basically told, you are now encumbered with the weight of the Hollywood system and you're now beholden to us. The final scene of the film is, maybe I should not even be doing this at all. That's almost more the read I get of it. It's a materializing of this window into he always has this window, this longing on the wall of, what if I wasn't doing this? And then after his script is rejected, after he's told that we own you and you suck, but we don't care, it's more important to us that we own you, we're going to throw you out on the town because you are one of our contracted writers. To me, the ending is got a head in a box, I've got this baggage I can't get away from, but fuck it, maybe I should just sit on the beach. To me, that's what it is, and I just think that this is the sort of film where the catharsis of its creation is important. If this film was written because this other film wasn't progressing and Joel had to get into his own head and get something out, the ending is for him, and that's fine. But I just think it's hard to get much out of it for me other than maybe I just want to be done. Maybe I don't want to go make that other movie anymore. Maybe this is it for me. Maybe I just want to be on the beach.
I think that's a very reasonable reading of this, and frankly, I think before Tanner opened his mind box and like told me about like, oh, this high low art thing, I think that's maybe where I came down on it as well. But I see that as not necessarily a thematic choice in terms of, oh, that has a lot of value thematically, but personally and escapist wise for the character of Barton Fink that has been stuck in this maze of people that don't like him and that maybe he's not very good at the job that he's chosen for himself. The fact that he has a moment of peace where he realizes there are other paths for him. I see that as a kind of artistic catharsis of, you don't have to be pigeonholed into one thing, that one way to see yourself or one way that other people see you as a creator, as a person, as a worker in whatever industry you're in. He realizes, if we're going under your rating, that maybe peace is outside of the system, and maybe the fact that I've been so anxious and annoyed and frustrated for years, supposedly, for Barton Fink, is because I was in a place, a mind space, and a place and a group of people that I didn't like, but he never wrestled with that until the end of the movie.
I think it's obvious that that creation and writing fills Barton Fink with anxiety.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole crux of his character in the film. So I'd agree, and I don't think the whole thing of what you were saying of like the ending on the beach is incongruous from with what we've been saying before, Abram.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think part of my issue with it then is, again, if I'm working from this reading, I guess I still just take issue, or I guess that I'm beginning to take more issue with this notion that we should accept that he is a hack. If you were saying before that's what we should accept, I think the beginning of the film is saying we should accept that he is actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
If we read the ending as the system has wronged me ending, was his script ever that bad to begin with? It was the rejection. Was it the rejection of a really good script, actually, and the frustration at the core of the narrative when this was being written was my really good work is not being valued? I think that, to me, there reaches a point when you make a film like this that there are too many potential thematic readings to where they start
Yeah.
canceling each other out, and it
I
starts
see.
to
We
lose a
have-
little bit of meaning.
You have just posited like you have two ideas that are like 180 degrees in phase apart. Like you said,
Yeah.
they cancel each other out, and they seem to be kind of opposite readings. Is he a hack, or did the industry chew him up and spit him out?
Hmm. Well, I actually don't think they're necessarily 180 because, regardless, he views himself as a skilled writer. No matter what rating you take, I think you have to agree that he has an ego and he believes that what he's written is great.
He tells him that he's like,
And
I think this
so-
is the best thing I've ever written.
And so the rejection is rejection of him believing that he's quality, and that this is frankly the first time in the film where he hasn't been told that. Because from the opening scene through Lipnick, through the other producers, they're always like, "Yeah, he's a great writer. We want that Barton Fink style." And so I think that theme works, but I think also him believing he's a good writer, and the Hollywood system rejecting him doesn't necessarily exclude the fact that he could still be a hack in the eyes of other people.
I think Tucker's right, and that I don't think it's impossible that what the Coens are telling us is that yes, Barton Fink is a hack and not a very good writer, but he did write like a brainy, heady script that the studios don't like because they don't like brainy, heady scripts.
Yeah.
They're also
I think
idiots.
this can both be true.
Much like a lot of the Coens' work, it kind of comes down to everyone's dumb. Everyone's dumb, and who knows what. It's the quote from the end of Burn After Reading from J.K. Simmons. What did we learn? What does it mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, it's very possible that I'm just personally hung up on the indifference or or perceived incongruity of some of this thematic stuff to where it starts to undermine, I feel like, the construction of the character and everything. And it's totally possible that's just my personal hang up, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's hard to refute the fact that all we know on a concrete objective level is that Barton Fink is a desired person.
Yeah.
And maybe part of what the narrative is trying to say is that the people of desire are not actually worthy of it. And that's interesting in its own way too, but I just feel like in some ways the whole film just feels too nebulous for me. And I think we ought to talk about Audrey, and we ought to talk about her death. We ought to talk about the detective.
You should
we ought to
move off
talk
the
about
ending for sure.
her relationship. But I think it is interesting because you guys are also talking about, and I think you're right, the notion that in that picnic scene he's just there to stand up for Audrey is probably not a totally fair one. But I just have a hard time really understanding his motive towards her, and I have a hard time understanding the point of her death. So maybe you guys can help me with this, because I
What's your confusion about his desire towards her?
I just when they first meet, right, at the door,
Mhm.
the character of Audrey being set up is a very interesting one. I think she's a really interesting character in the narrative, in that she is in some ways perhaps the I was going to say purest, but maybe the most sympathetic character in the narrative.
I would
In
say
that
easily, yeah.
she is being wronged on a personal and systemic level, physically, emotionally, intellectually. She's being physically abused. Her work's not being appreciated, so on. And so you almost expect, like as a viewer, okay, when we meet Audrey here at the door, what's going to happen is Barton Fink and her are going to start up this relationship, and that they're going to learn from each other, and they're going to fall in love or something. I think that kind of seems right. There's the missed connection. He makes an ill-judged move, but you can kind of see in the performance of Audrey that maybe she wants this to go somewhere. She's tired of Mr. Mayhew.
Mhm.
I just feel like if there is this desire for Audrey to become freed and for her to find Barton Fink, and she wants to do that, 'cause I think she does want that. What does her death mean? What does
I
it
think-
mean when the relationship that is being like with these characters being put onto the same path?
Yeah.
When that is killed, when she is killed, why? I guess that's what I'm still struggling with.
I think that for me, the disconnect between your reading and my reading, I think, comes down to that first moment. I agree that you would expect it to be this narrative arc with the payoff of her escape and having the sympathetic character be redeemed at the end and leading and living a satisfactory life for herself, because she is sympathetic and you do find her very interesting and compelling, and she is attractive to Barton. But I think the point of this film being set in the 40s and being set within the Hollywood system and critiquing all of that is that you expect that because other movies have told you that, and not because either that is because films are very formulaic, as this film is very critical of the fact that you can write just a wrestling picture by watching another one and just doing it again. That formula has been drilled into our heads in terms of genre pictures. And this one does have that edge of a meet cute romantic moment. She's in strife, he can help her out. But the reality, and I think why the film doesn't pay that off in the way that you would expect, is a fractaling of like your expectations of how that moment can go. Is that in the reality of this world, everyone is a piece of shit. And it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have there be a happy ending for even the most sympathetic of characters, and your expectation built off of that from the beginning is not because this film explicitly establishes that, but because your mind is already geared towards that because of the genre conventions of other films. And playing with that and playing with the fact that, shit kind of sucks in real life. I think that is definitely, as Tanner was talking, a big theme into the Coen's work of everyone's kind of a piece of shit, and at the end of the day, what does it all mean? I understand that is totally an unsatisfactory, on a narrative level theme, like we were talking about with Grand Hotel, and like episode 12 of this show, 3 years ago. But for me, primarily because I've seen some other Coen work, and I understand their sort of kind of nihilism in their writing.
I would call it absurdism. I think there's
Sure.
a line there. Nihilism or absurdism is just kind of like is nihilism flipped on its head.
Yeah.
But I still, regardless,
With a kooky smile.
with a kooky smile of like, who cares that it doesn't all matter? Essentially.
But I think it's important that it doesn't end in a happy place for her, because I think that plays into the themes of absurdism and nihilism that this movie has, and the fact that every character is a giant pile of shit in this movie.
Yeah.
If I can, because I want
Go for it.
I want to drill in on that, because ultimately, sure, they don't get together, they don't get married, we don't do the Blade Runner studio cut of them driving off, an overhead shot in a nice yellow car. But why is she killed? What's the point of killing her? I'm curious from you guys' perspective. Okay, it's about nihilism, it's about subversion of expectations, at risk of running ourselves down the Ryan Johnson subvert just to subvert rabbit hole. What is the reason that she is dead? Why do we get to her death off screen after we go down the drain?
I would actually say there's a pretty clear-cut reason for this in my mind. And again, we have to do some fucking big brain film rating for this.
Okay.
Here we go.
But it's because she's not useful to Barton anymore. He's gotten the sex and he's gotten the writing. And so what does she have to offer her anymore? What does she have to offer him anymore? And so narratively, she's killed off to springboard him into a world of more chaos. But also I think in terms of her arc ending there, it's because both of Barton's potential gains from her have been succeeded in that moment.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting reading actually. That she has now entered Barton Fink's mind palace, and
Yeah.
having gotten what he needs from her, she is no longer useful, and thus. This is obviously
could
like
it also
what in this
be-
movie is real or what really happens, but
yeah.
Charlie probably kills her. We can assume.
I
think if
and,
we're
like,
gonna
puts her back,
Take this
But
stuff
did
at
she actually
face
die?
value.
If the Earl is his mind palace and all of it's fake, did she actually die, or did
know.
she die because she's not useful to him anymore, and that's his reality?
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because we never hear about this murder outside of the Earl.
Yeah.
I mean, we never see Charlie, we never see Chet, we never see the detectives outside of the Earl, and we never hear about the fact that she died elsewhere.
Yeah.
They say, I
maybe
don't
I'm-
know.
I want to talk about
I
Charlie
think
too.
because they also say that Murphy died, right? That she died, and then WP
Oh yeah. Like, he also yeah.
and
Um,
his Barton Fink's parents don't seem to be around. I think that the film is
Well,
definitely
that's just because they didn't pick up the phone. There's
Yeah.
there's like, maybe there's like but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that means that there was the murderous reality outside.
yeah. I want to talk about Charlie.
okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Abram. I want to get your thoughts on that, and before we move on to the good man himself.
No, we can do that because I think it all just ties into the same.
Sure.
And again, the answer to some of this stuff might be just Abram. You gotta buy into the absurdism, and if you can't, then if you don't, then you can't like the movie, and that's okay.
There's an element to that, I think.
There's-
But I think it's not I think it's not unreasonable for you to ask, like, narratively,
Yeah.
why did she die?
What
Yeah,
are-
yeah.
I mean, what is the point of these things being included? That is almost the
Yeah.
purpose of this damn show is to ask that question.
It's like I gave Saw 2 stars. I gave Thanksgiving 2 stars. Are those films probably of a higher quality? Yes. And is it because I don't like
Then
their
Barton Fink, I would
genres? I'm not giving Barton Fink 2 stars. That makes me feel better.
That's good.
It's because there's a set of conventions that I just can't subscribe to. But I think we're gonna John Goodman's character I don't like for a number of reasons. Not on a performance level. I think he is very charismatic and
He's so good. I want to talk about his performance first and foremost.
we'll
but
just do
let's
that.
take a break.
Let's do that.
Let's take a break from talking about the allegory for a moment and talk about how fucking cool and charismatic and fun John Goodman is. Because he's obviously a Coen Brothers collaborator. And at this time in 1991, he's largely known as like this sitcom jovial family man on Roseanne, as this like lovable oaf husband. And in this, he's like that with a very dark and sinister twist that he is, of course, a serial killer. He's Carl Madman Munt, as we learn at the end of the film.
But not just a
But
serial
he-
killer,
oh,
a Nazi too.
Oh yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point. That he has this sort of like imposing edge to him, which I think the Coens are very good at bringing out of John Goodman, and he sort of grew into as other directors learned that he could do that. Of this, when he's introduced, you hear that lumbering, and the camera's tracking like
mixing,
the sound of him through the wall.
The mixing
the
is
hallway.
so excellent in the Hotel Earl, in the Mind Palace, because they just play. I've got to get into it because we're running on a record length already, and if I don't speak on the
boy.
mixing now, I'll never speak on it. Because
for
it
it.
plays out, I think, really with John Goodman's character, with Charlie, that scene where we hear the footsteps lumbering, we start with this laughing far away. The mix so excellently places things close and far from us, stuff that we can't see but we can hear, and that either concerns us or intrigues us. And it allows these moments to be really freaking quiet. Like, you got to have this is not a movie to be watched on your crappy sound system because it's going to sound bad. But when you have it turned up very loud, when you have it turned up nice and loud to like a reasonable theater volume, you get that dynamic range wherein the dialogue is sitting at a nice, like, we hear it all, we understand it all, but it can get so much quieter from that to just allow these moments to be really, really still and our ears to become very, very attentive as a result of starvation. We starve the ears of any sound, and then we become very noticing of each individual thing that's going on. And the way that the sound designers and the mixers were able to place and then move around, and in conjunction with some excellent camera work, make us really pay attention to what is going on beyond the walls of his hotel room, and what is his neighbor doing, what are the upstairs people doing. You can hear stuff in the drain. I mean, I don't think modern movies use dynamic range like this as well. Like this is an advantage of the time of this film being made in '91, that they could have been working on early digital systems, or at the tail end the most advanced analog systems, allowing them to really exploit the medium to its greatest effect, and to make, I mean, that specific scene in which we introduce John Goodman so unsettling, and I think plays excellently for the twist. I mean, if you know that the twist is coming, that's so obvious in that scene. But when I didn't know that the twist was coming, I was just being toyed with by the audio in a way that wasn't like upsetting to me. It wasn't telling me what to think, but it was rather like pulling me along and intriguing me, and who this character is, and what is his deal right off the bat. And then we get more good stuff like that later on in the film too.
Yeah, I mean, when he opens the door and John Goodman has that look on his face, you're like, is he going to kill Barton Fink right now? And then he softens. He's like, I'm real sorry there, bud. And then he takes on this like gentle giant aphorism for the rest of for most of the film, actually.
That's a fucking $platinum word right there.
And Tucker's gonna fact check me on.
No, I just need to see if it's a real word. I don't even know what it means.
No, aphorism. That's a real word.
And it's
I don't know if you used it right, but it's a real word. I don't know what it means. That's
compare
pithy observation.
Oh,
that contains general truth.
not hit.
Damn
not
it.
the right
Okay.
word.
Disposition, maybe you're looking
Disposition.
for.
Yes, thank you. But like, and that's
Affect.
affect.
That's
That's probably what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Affectation as
Sure.
well. But like that's what America knew him for at the time. And then you get to bring it around at the end when we have gotten the realization that he is Carl Madman Munt, and he is charging down the hallway at the detectives with a double-barrel shotgun in hand, yelling, what does he yell? Look at me! Look upon me! I'll show you the life of the mind! Look upon me! I'll show you the life of the mind! And then he gets in there with Barton Fink, and his ear infection is leaking. And he's amazing in every element of it. Like beforehand, he just is a machine. You pop in a dime, and John Goodman will pop out like a folksy saying. And he's like, I love when he's talking about the doctor, and he's like, you should give me $10 for telling you I have an ear infection.
Funny.
Like he is so lovable, and yet he can turn a switch and be a monster lumbering into your room while it's up in flames. And it can be, I think, he can be like if we want to say like the Hotel Earl is a bit of a purgatory for him. I think John Goodman is pretty clearly like the devil of this scenario, a satanic
That's visually
figure.
obvious.
As he walks
when
forward
he's charging
and
down the hallway
flames,
that's on fire.
flank
Yeah.
him, and he seems to be the
In
creator.
case it wasn't obvious.
And
yeah.
they go, oh, it's hot. He's around. You know,
Mhm.
he is the
where he
cause
says-
of the wallpaper to curl and to drip. So there's
He calls
something with that.
the Hotel Earl his home. He's like, you come into my home and tell me to be quiet.
That's a great line because it's ultimately such a petty thing to be mad about.
Exactly.
It's a noise
you
complaint.
don't listen.
I think some of my favorite moments of his acting are before he makes the turn that in hindsight make it quite obvious. I think a couple moments that he executes on very well, and this is partially thanks to great abrupt editing, is in the wrestling moment. You're like, oh, why is this guy so strong and so like dominant in this moment? Or when Barton Fink goes to help when Audrey is killed, it's like, why is this guy actually quite calm about this dead woman in the bed? Why does he know what to do? So I think he nails those moments really well. But if I may, Tanner, look at him from a higher level.
Yeah.
This is another point.
Pretty hard. He's very tall.
This is another point where I have issue with what the film is maybe trying to say or do. Again, if it's about class, and if it's about he is the person of the mind, he is this person that Barton Fink is trying to write about, appeal to, commiserate with, what are the Coens doing by making him such a closetedly awful person? There is an interesting angle of anti-Semitism in the film that is interesting to explore.
Yeah.
Not only the anti-Semitic slurs used against Barton Fink, but the notion that his friend ends up being a demonic like Nazi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that
At the beginning of World War II, mind you.
the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
Jews are also seemingly anti-Semitic to each other. It's pretty well known that all the studio bosses
Yeah.
at this time in Hollywood were Jewish themselves and really tried to self-censor the industry to hide that fact. They just didn't want to be known as Jewish when they were, and all their writers were Jewish also, and they wrote movies that and so, but then he uses slurs against his longtime friend, who like they're both Jewish. Like, what's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's sort of an interesting cultural reading of the time period, but I would like a little bit of help understanding what we are doing if we're taking the only working class lens and turning them into this awful person.
Well,
How
I
how
think
do
it's
you
actually
Yeah, how do you square this with the fact that he is supposed to be the guy that Barton Fink wants to be writing about and understanding?
Yeah, I think this ties back to one thing that I was mentioning earlier, but this is the most clear example of it. But again, if we're subscribing to that, this is his mind. That frankly, Charlie Meadows is not a real person. It is his interpretation of the kind of person that he wants to write about. He doesn't actually believe that just the stories of the working class people are interesting enough, and so this person in his mind must be exaggeratory and ridiculous and literally Satan and a Nazi and a murderer and has such a heated aura that the wallpaper curls at his very presence. Like he is not meant to represent those people as they actually are, but as Barton Fink sees them, and as that's the character that inspires him to write about a big burly man with a similar backstory and all these kind of things. He's ridiculous because Barton Fink thinks that those kind of people actually need to be ridiculous to be interesting to him.
I would say that it's because he doesn't actually want to. He clearly doesn't take an interest in Charlie Meadows as the affable country dolt
Insurance salesman.
that he pretends to be.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't take an interest, and he doesn't listen. And I think that the turn at the end is a bit of the fallout of maybe his not so good intentions.
Making a Mission Impossible Fallout trailer reference.
Thank you. And of course, if we want to take a more like
Ethan Kelly.
if we want to take a more religious view of it, it is Charlie, i.e., the devil, taking on like taking on a form that could maybe teach Barton Fink a lesson, yet he refuses to be taught, and so he must be tortured for eternity. Except he doesn't get tortured for eternity, unless you want to be like,
I think he does.
He's trapped in the studio system, and maybe this woman on the beach is like a moment of reprieve, like what he could have had an imagination thing for him. But ultimately, yeah, I think there's a couple things there where like he takes Charlie Meadows for granted, and thus the ugly underbelly must show itself to bring Barton Fink to his
justice.
To bring him to justice. Exactly.
Yeah.
I buy it. I see it.
Yeah, I just think all the interpretations of how the film actually treats Charlie in the long run, because I do agree with you, Abram, this film is very intent on subverting what you initially think a lot of its setups are going to be. Barton Fink being likable, Charlie Meadows not being a murderer, the love story set up with Audrey. It's intent on subverting these things, but I think the film is intended to be viewed through the retrospective angle of once the truth is revealed.
Yeah.
And once the truth is revealed about Charlie Meadows, you realize he was never supposed to be just the working man. He was always supposed to be, there's something darker going on here. He's representative of something larger. He is a thematic force at the end of the day, rather than just an insurance guy, because that's literally a lie. He was never an insurance guy. He was never a random working class guy.
He was never
always a
Charlie
murderer.
Meadows.
Yeah,
he was Carl Mad Bad Munt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, but that's also the level I'm thinking about it, right? I'm just not. I'm thinking beyond just the insurance guy. Why is the insurance guy
Yeah.
here? Well, then maybe this movie is more. Maybe the movie is a commentary on like culture of that era, a sort of complacency, or a sort of potential um, vile tenor within your neighbors. Maybe that's what it's
Hmm.
trying to say.
Sure.
But I just think that you have to prescribe so many maybes to like every character because otherwise, if you look at this as a film that's being set up about a writer being unable to connect to the lower class people he's exploiting for his own gain for a story, who is the fault with Barton Fink for sucking? Is the fault with the only working class stand-in for being a Nazi? Is everybody in the wrong?
Here's the thing.
What's it
I think
about?
I think as viewers, you're
Yeah.
always clued into the fact that Charlie isn't exactly what he's letting on.
Sure.
But Barton Fink is
He's
too
he's
stupid to see
he's
that.
too
Like
self-absorbed
he's,
to notice
he
it.
doesn't say it with me, folks.
He doesn't
doesn't
listen.
listen.
Sure.
He doesn't pay attention. He doesn't understand anything about Charlie. He's not curious enough to be looking into that sort of thing, to be like really delving into his character. He uses him as like a break. Much like the Coens used this as a break from their writing of Miller's Crossing. He uses Charlie as a break from his like writing 2 words on a typewriter, and now he gets to drink and talk to his best friend. And by talk to him, I mean just talk about how important the writing that he's doing is.
The writing
you
that
know?
he's not doing, yeah.
The writing that he's not doing is.
And it is cool watching them skewer themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that is cool. I guess I think I'm basically out of things to say.
Okay.
But here's where I would leave it for myself.
All right.
Unless we've got larger things to talk about still. And then I'm ending too early and I did the faux pas of the podcasting world. But
Oops.
I think that Barton Fink is too metaphorical and too concerned with obviously forcing you out of a linear understanding or a logical understanding of the world to be this, in my opinion, contradictory and unclear and frustrating in what the characters mean or are trying to do. I think that's ultimately my problem because I think you guys are totally right that this is a beautiful film. It's a well acted film. It's a witty film. But I just think that for me, if you look at the film linearly, you don't learn a whole lot about Barton Fink. His plot arc is basically I'm trying to write a script. I can't really do it. Oh, and then I did it and I turned it in and they didn't like it. A woman gets murdered halfway through. Some detectives show up. This guy loves Hitler. He shoots some guys with a shotgun. We end. I just don't think that that's a super compelling level. So I think you have to go deeper. And I just find that the deeper I go, and I don't want to prescribe that it doesn't make sense because there's probably a reality if I watch this movie 5 more times that I get it a lot better and I have a reading. But on my knee-jerk reaction is to say that what's beneath the style, is a lot of substance that is like too much substance. Like if you tried to eat a whole buffet by yourself, it's all different things you're trying to shove together and it just doesn't really work. That's
I
my
love
problem.
the buffet that the Coen Brothers have lined up for me, and I'll try a little bit of everything. I'll try a little bit of this reading. I'll try a little bit of that reading, and I don't get an upset tummy from trying all these
Sure.
different foods. I enjoy myself and I pat my belly much like a John Goodman character might do, and I buff my knuckles on my shirt and say, what a great film, and I understand many different readings of it actually.
See, it makes me need a Tums.
Yeah, there you go.
I just think the reality is that you're right that on a surface level it's confusing, and I think that's why, as I said at the very beginning, though I think I've kind of retracted that, or I am retracting that as we've gone through. I was cold on the ending, but I'm not now because I think the film is not intended to be watched on that surface level. I think that the Coens wrote it with the intention of being thematically interesting and having multiple endings, and frankly, that's the kind of film we're gearing ourselves towards watching the Palme d'Or winners, is films that are a little bit headier, that aren't supposed to make complete logical linear sense on a filmmaking level, and aren't necessarily supposed to be easy for interpretation for the wider audience. And so I respect the film a lot because it's not doing what I would have wanted it to do from the beginning. I usually do gear towards things that are linearly told and have clear thematic value and all of that, but I feel like this film does it so masterfully in combination with all of its technical aspects that I'm drawn in to want to delve into it more. I've often found a lot of the films that are intended to be viewed metaphorically and not on a linear level, to be cold and distant for me, because the filmmaking and the performances are usually rather stiff, and they're trying things that are so radical that you have a hard time, or I at least have a hard time getting into it. But the way that this film is presented, with lavish sets and interesting actors and funny dialogue, and the way that it is about that downward spiral of an artist, and is about the fact that there are people with differing opinions, it, I think, leaves the perfect amount of gap to do that research. It doesn't feel like a wall to me. It feels like a wall with cracks that I can reach in and fill in myself. And so I wouldn't have wanted Barton Fink, this kind of Barton Fink, 2 years ago. But I feel like getting myself into the mind space of, this is a Palme d'Or winner, this is from a pair of very clever, artistically oriented people, and made in a time, in a context that's about so much. I feel like it was intended to be that, and it did nail that. And I personally wouldn't want to ascribe this film's ambiguous nature, its intentional ambiguous nature, as a failure, because it was so intentional, and because it is in that kind of, it's never presented as anything other than that. This is a film by artistic people that won the up your ass pretentious award.
Just call it the French Award.
Yeah, the French award. And I think it does that very well.
I think that's fair, but again, I wouldn't. I hope that my track record wouldn't suggest that I'm the guy that doesn't want the theme and the weird and the ambiguity. Ballad Narayama, the one which we reviewed recently, is also, I would say, an equally heady film. I just think that the headwinds point in the same direction. I think
That's
that
fair.
this movie, if it was like a weather vane, it's being spun 360 for an hour 58, and I guess that's kind of my problem.
Yeah, very interesting.
Timo, you have any closing statements? As I often do, I have a collection of
Supposed to let him
thoughts.
say something.
I was gonna ask him for his closing statement and then just say, like, I have a collection of thoughts, as I often do.
I think that what Abram has said makes a lot of sense to me as like from a film criticism point of view. Like, I think that you're right that this kind of cross section, that these two, it seems like there are two opposing readings of the film, and well, now I'm thinking, how interesting would it be as a filmmaker to try to make something like that? I don't know if that is the recipe for success of a movie and success of like audience understanding and gaining that like higher level artistic rating or fulfillment that you get from art. But from an intellectual filmmaker creativity challenge point of view, to create something in which you, like, we were able to pick out two different threads that seemed to be in direct confrontation with each other, that were like nearly opposite. And so I think it would be the less successful work of art would actually have those threads at more of a kind of a, a 90-degree angle, or at not as a squarely. They've got to know what's going on they know what's going on in this movie in order to put the stuff in there that makes us believe that perhaps he's a hack, perhaps the industry is spitting him out. But I do agree that the lack of, I guess, that the ambiguousness, the lack of clear meaning in it kind of hurts my interpretation of the film. I mean, because I came into it being like, there's substance in here, like, we're gonna get to it. I think we kind of did, but I still can't quite put my finger on what it means. And perhaps that's the benefit of the Palme d'Ors, is that they have a lot of this, like, we maybe won't necessarily know, or maybe that these films take more readings. So I think that I still like this film a lot, and I think that I like the experience of viewing this film is really fun and is a really excellent movie as a watcher. But when we get into this more deep analytical level, I think that there are some cracks in it that have been revealed to me throughout this discussion. So while I think it's funny and great, I think that perhaps the muddiness of the thematics is not quite the best.
All I'll say is that I love this kind of movie that has so many possible different readings that you can talk about them for. What are we going on? Nearly 2 hours
Yeah,
now, something like
we
that.
gotta wrap this one up.
Yeah, something like that. So like it's in. I just feel all of the artistic intention and meaning that the Coens have injected into this. That I know there's so many fascinating readings of it, and on top of that, it's so fun and energetic to watch on its own that I could definitely see myself returning to this. I've been thinking about it basically all day. You know, since I watched it last night, I was thinking about, oh yeah, this thing is and this thing and this thing is this thing. But to speak of these things, while everyone gets the things pulled up,
Yes.
the score sheet.
Give us the Palme details.
Yes. The oh, Timo, I
Pretty
love
good.
that.
That's pretty
I
good.
love that, Timo. Okay. Well, one last piece of trivia that I found quite interesting. Since we brought up the editing of
Yep.
Barton Fink, you'll find in the credits that it's edited by Roderick James, which is actually a pseudonym of the Coens. They edited this film themselves.
Okay.
But they couldn't credit themselves because I think of some DGA rules and guidelines.
Oh.
So they couldn't get credit.
I thought it was the front man of Loaded Diaper who edited this movie.
Roderick James. Okay, so jury president. Let's get out of the way. Jury president in 1991 was Roman Polanski.
Okay.
Bummer.
Oh boy.
Notable jury members included Whoopi Goldberg, whom we all know and love. She's Sister Act in Sister Act Back in the Habit. Also, Abram, for you. Vangelis was representing his home country of Greece. Alan Parker, who is a director, best known for Pink Floyd The Wall and Mississippi Burning. And a cinematographer, Italian cinematographer by the name of Vittorio Storaro, excuse me, who is the cinematographer of a film that we have coming up in this version of Quest, Apocalypse Now, and a film that we saw in the last version of Quest, The Last Emperor.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
There were 19 films in competition. The opening film for that Cannes Film Festival in competition was David Mamet's Homicide, and the another notable film in competition there was Spike Lee's Jungle Fever.
Okay.
The second place prize went to La Belle Noiseux, which is a Jacques Rivette film. And the third place was a tie between Lars von Trier's Europa and Maroon Baghdadi's Out of Life. Worth noting that of Barton Fink, as we circle back around to it to give it a score, it is the first and only film to win 3 major prizes at the Cannes Film Festival. It won the Palme d'Or, it won Best Director for Joel Coen, and Best Actor for John Turturro.
I'm putting you on the spot. Do you know what it was nominated for at the Oscars? Because I know it was up
Yes.
for 3.
It was up for three Oscars. Those included supporting actor for
The guy who plays Lippick.
Michael
Lippick,
Lerner.
Michael
That's his name. Michael Lerner was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Best Production Design, and Best Costume Design.
Wow. I would not have picked those as my standout technical categories of this movie. I think that the cinematography.
Michael Lerner is very odd to me because, like, you would go John Goodman, I think.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but Michael Lerner, I think maybe does more. with
he's
his
so
stage
funny.
Michael Lerner
Oh my
is
God.
great. Let's be
He's
clear.
and-
He's
and-
fantastic.
And if
Fucking
the Academy and if Hollywood is gonna like have to pick somebody, why not pick the studio exec just to stick
That's a
it
fair
to
point.
their bosses, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Great comedic timing when he fires Leo and then kisses the boot of Barton Fink.
Yeah.
I just want to say that.
Yeah,
It's
and
then-
very funny. It's very well done.
One of my favorite lines from the LAPD detectives getting it under the wire is when they found the body of the ear, nose, and throat doctor, and he's like, except for the ears and the nose, because he cut off the head.
left
Oh, yeah.
the throat.
We found an ear, nose, and throat doctor, minus ears and nose. Just some great like gumshoe detective talk in this movie.
The dialogue is very screwball in this movie, and it comes
Yeah,
out in lines like that. Okay, let's give it a score. My number's
I
punched
get
in.
one.
I'm waiting on one box to be filled. Okay, and the score is we'll find it out in 3, 2, 2. Okay, we have a number. It is 8.1. That is going to put Barton Fink at the number 3rd spot on our list. The point breakdown is Abram with a 6.3. I gave it an 8.3. Tucker gave it an 8.7, and Tanner gave it a 9.1. So very predictable, I would say. Those are predictable scores. You could have seen that one coming.
Nah. What are we blabbing about?
It's going on number 3. Woohoo!
Very good.
Very good. Very good.
Out of 4, by the way.
Yeah, out of 4.
Yes. Now, let us
What's next?
find out
Wheel.
what's next. My favorite segment of Quest, I alluded to it earlier.
Me.
Tanner's warming up. I am getting it pulled up. Here you go.
Can I just say, by the way, Al Naz, to give Al Naz a shout out. Al Naz, you've been saying you want an episode of Quest where there's 3 voices and 1 dissenting opinion. Well, you just got it, so you're welcome.
You just did. Yeah. Well, I like that the Barton Fink episode is kind of just us trying to convince Abram that Barton Fink is good, actually.
It makes sense, actually.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. There we have it.
Shall we?
The spin wheel.
Okay. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And the wheel's deal, as you can see, is number 73. So what?
And number 73 is going to give us the film from 1997,
Stick in the 90s.
directed by Abbas Kiarostami. We are watching a film. Oh God, these are some names I'm not going to be able to pronounce, so
Yeah,
we're just
we're
going to skip
gonna
over that part.
butcher
Taste of Cherry.
Ah.
Taste
It's actually
of cherry.
have on
Oh, do you?
Criterion, I believe.
We keep watching that. Physical media, baby. Physical media for the win, baby.
Woo. So,
We are stewards of future filmmaking, or whatever Guillermo del Toro said.
yes. This one, I don't think I've seen any Kiarostami movies. So I'm excited to have a chance to watch this. Iranian cinema is something that it was floating around. It was on my periphery as I was in film school. It was referenced a couple times, but being the white boy that I am, I stuck with European history
That's fair.
cinema. So here I'm gonna get some I'll get some education with this movie and expand what is world cinema, which was just, one of the reasons we chose the Palme d'Ors.
Yep.
Hour and a half, hour 35.
Wow. Oh,
Good.
thank you, Jury de Khan, or however you say the board. Or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Something like
Something
that.
like that.
Probably, yeah.
We'll need to practice before the episode. Getting everyone's names down. We'll do it.
Mm-hmm. So until then, you know what I always say: stay cool, keep warm, and peace.
What?
Something's got some part of the contraption broke, Timo.
I'm aware.
Uh-oh.
I'm just like, look, there it comes back.
Contraption returned.
Contraption blasted.
I-
Contraption.
It's like Demon Souls humanity restored.
Contraption
Yes.
restored.
Contraption returned.
Femboy impregnated.
The impossible task.